Hey, I'm here at the AACA Central Spring Meet in Auburn, Indiana. This is a great little show, not quite as big as the Hershey show by any means, but still a mighty powerful little show. Anyway, let's go and take a look at some cars.
Of course, no good car show around Auburn is complete unless the North American Auto and Truck Museum brings out their GM Futureliner. I've covered that museum before in a previous video. It is a fantastic museum and shares a parking lot with the Auburn Cord-Duesenberg Museum. If you're in Auburn, just look at both museums. It's a whole day right there. GM built 12 of these for the 1939 World's Fair, and they were reworked for the 1953 Parade of Progress. The sides open up and reveal displays inside. Our first car over at the car show proper is a 1960 DeSoto Adventurer. Despite the fact that this is a great looking car, 1960 was the year that Chrysler announced they were discontinuing the DeSoto. DeSoto was a mid-range car priced below the Chrysler but above the Plymouth and Dodge. Late 1950s saw declining sales and DeSoto being squeezed out by other Chrysler brands. The DeSoto found itself occupying about the same market niche as Edsel over at Ford, with unfortunately about the same results. There was a foreshortened 1961 model year, but that was it. Production of the 61 DeSotos actually ceased before the end of 1960. It's really a shame because I've always liked the design of the DeSotos. I think they really wore the Chrysler Forward look well. It's interesting that the driver's seat here is still a bench seat, but the driver's seat sits up a little higher. That's kind of neat. Gives you that shoulder support for long drives. Moving forward just a couple of years, we've got a 1962 Oldsmobile Starfire. The Starfire was Oldsmobile's entry into the personal luxury car field. In 1962, it used a standard 394 that had 345 horsepower. I've always liked the 62 Oldsmobiles. I think it's that little chrome rectangle thing that breaks up all the horizontal lines. It just really works design-wise for me. I don't know. Two body styles were available for Starfire in 62, hardtop and convertible. Here's a nice little Indy Racer, and by Indy Racer I don't mean an Indy Racer style car, I mean a car that actually raced at the Indianapolis 500. This car finished 5th at the 1954 running of the Indy 500. It was driven by driver Mike Nazarek, who unfortunately would be killed the following year during a sprint car race. The car is referred to as a McNamara Special, and it gets that name from McNamara Motor Freight. That's the company owned by race car builder Lee Elkins. That beautiful engine you're looking at is by Offenhauser. This is Offenhauser engine serial number 73. Fred Offenhauser had worked with legendary engine builder Harry Miller and had took over his shop when he retired in the 1930s. The Offenhauser brand has now become almost synonymous with performance. The chassis is a Curtiss Craft 300C. If you don't remember Curtiss Craft, they are the ones that built the sports car that Earl Muntz turned into the Muntz Jet. See, it's all interconnected. Some very judgmental people here, judges. Well, would you look at that? 1911 Olds Limited. There's only about 9 of these known to still exist, so it's always a treat to see one. When Billy Durant acquired Oldsmobile in 1908 to be part of the newly formed General Motors, he was trying to position Oldsmobile as the luxury mark for GM. You can certainly see that in this Olds Limited. Look at that. It takes 2 running board steps to get up into this thing. It is a massive car. Unfortunately for Durant, Ransom E. Olds had seen the future of the automobile industry as a lightweight, inexpensive car, one that was exemplified by the Curve Dash Olds that had been introduced a decade earlier. Ransom had left Oldsmobile prior to the GM acquisition, and the Curve Dash Oldsmobile was no longer made. Unfortunately, the public perception of Oldsmobile as an inexpensive car really hurt the luxury rebranding. Man, that is a beautiful engine. Anyway, the mantle of luxury brand would eventually fall to Cadillac, and the rest is history. 1902 St. Louis. I really like seeing these early cars. The body style is referred to as a Stanhope. Look at how the front passenger seats fold up and largely disappear. Before you wonder about the wisdom of putting fully grown passengers right in front of the driver, that front seat was actually advertised as a children's seat. So you're putting, kids in front of the driver. The St. Louis Motor Carriage Company was formed in 1899 and was the first successful motor car company west of the Mississippi. The company was formed by partners John French and George Doris. The company was fairly successful until 1905 when John French wanted to greatly expand and he moved the company to Peoria, Illinois. By the way, you're looking at a 130 cubic inch single cylinder 9 horsepower engine. Anyway, back to our story. French's partner George Doris elected to stay behind in St. Louis and formed a new car company under his own name. St. Louis Motor Carriage ran into financial troubles right away in Peoria, and they folded up shop in 1907. Hey, look, it's another St. Louis. This one's from 1903. Anyway, George Doris's new car, the Doris, did all right, but never really sold in large numbers. It too ran into financial difficulties in the 1920s. There was some talk of a merger between Doris, Hayes, and Winton, but that never really materialized to save the company. They ceased production in 1925. There are two St. Louis cars here because they are being shown by George Doris, grandson of George Doris Company founder. This 1903, by the way, was originally sold in Stockton, California, and then resold to its second owner in 1905. Take a look at this 1905 California registration tag. George Doris bought it from the grandson of the second owner. Here's one you've never seen, 1972 AMC Gremlin Voyager. Look at that basket weave pattern, that's neat. This is a one-of-one prototype. This was introduced at the 1972 Auto Salon in Montreal, which would explain the French-sounding Voyager name. The truly interesting part here is that the entire cargo area kind of slides out like a drawer rather than having more of a normal hatchback. That gives you this easily accessible sort of table area that you can set up your lunch when you are voyaging. But actually, this would be a great car for tailgating. One of the drawbacks of this setup is they had to put the spare tire directly behind the driver. You can kind of see it there behind that sleeping bag. That means that behind the passenger there is a fold-up seat, making this only a three-seater. Moving over to a car that's slightly less rare, this is a 1958 Pontiac, but with a little twist. This is a Pontiac Parisienne. This was the first year for the Parisienne name, and it was a sub-series this year only of the Pontiac Laurentian. Don't know those names? That's because this is a product of General Motors Canada. The Canadian Pontiacs differed from their American counterparts primarily because they were built on a Chevrolet chassis. Body panels had to be redesigned to fit that chassis. Actually, this is a fairly rare car. These are always fun to see. 1950 Crosley Farm O-Road. It looks kind of like a Jeep, but it's smaller. They were designed to use around the farm and had optional front or rear PTOs. The design of the Farm O-Road kind of grew out of another car called the Crosley Pup. That was made during World War II as an experimental vehicle. It was designed to be like a Jeep, but much smaller and air-droppable. The idea was that the pup would be deployed along with airborne troops. There were quite a few prototypes built and underwent a lot of testing, but in the end it just wasn't adopted. Crosley's experience did give us this cool little utility vehicle though. Alright, I had to include this car just because of the fabulous looking paint combination it's got. This is a 1932 Buick Series 90. Or officially it's the 96C, which is the two-door convertible coupe. It's called out as a 4-passenger car because it's got that rumble seat back there. The Series 90 was the top-of-the-line Buick with the wire wheels and dual side mounts standard. Also, the Series 90 sat on a wheelbase that was a full 16 inches longer than the bottom-tier Series 50. Nice, solid-looking 1941 Ford Super Deluxe. Why is it covered in stickers? Because it's just completed the Great Race. If you've never heard of the Great Race, it's a large cross-country event featuring cars at least 45 years old. It's not a speed race per se, but teams of drivers have to match predetermined stage times over the course of the 9-day race. No modern GPS is allowed. There's a handicap system based on the age of the vehicle, giving advantages to older cars. All cars must be 100% stock. Oh, there's the website if you want to know more. That was greatrace.com if you didn't catch it. There's another site, greatrace.org, but that's a foot race and the use of cars would be cheating. Anyway, the race is further broken down into classes. This particular car raced in X class, which is set aside for high school students. Anyway, the race ended in late June. I didn't catch how they placed, but I'm sure they did great. 1930 Model A, but this is a body style you have likely never seen before. In 1929, Ford made a Model A town car with open chauffeur compartment. However, it didn't prove to be very popular because limousine buyers did not also want a Model A. In 1930, they made this, the Town Car Delivery. The luxury appointed delivery vehicle with body by Briggs. That roof over the driver's compartment unsnaps for an open chauffeur area just like the regular town car. In 1930 and 31, only 192 were made. A rare body style indeed. 1936 Divco Model S. The history here is that by the 1920s, Detroit Electric was having trouble competing against gasoline-powered cars. One of their executives suggested putting gasoline engines in some of their delivery trucks to extend the range. Suits at Detroit Electric Vehicle were not receptive, so he went out and formed his own company, Detroit Industrial Vehicle, or Divco for short. Divco would go on to produce some iconic delivery trucks. All right, I really can't be at a car show in Auburn without showing you at least one Auburn. This is the 1936, same year as that Divco, Model 852. Auburn had been around since the turn of the century, but was purchased in 1925 by E.L. Cord and became part of his high-end luxury car empire. Auburn managed to survive the Great Depression, but could not survive an investigation into E.L. Cord for stock manipulation in an attempted purchase of Checker Motors. He had to sell the company, and they ceased production in 1937. Between his three companies, Auburn, Cord, and Duesenberg, E.L. Cord is responsible for some of the best-looking cars of the 1930s. Some would say the best-looking cars ever. All right, I'm going to throw in a 1928 Model A here, not because it's a particularly rare car, but because I'm just a sucker for stake bed trucks. This is actually a Model AA. That's a Model A with a heavier duty chassis for a 1.5 ton capacity. This one has accessory rear fenders, front bumper, and, according to the sign, accessory dual overdrive transmission. I think it's just a really pretty truck. I like Terraplanes. Terraplane, of course, is the economy car brand for Hudson in the 1930s, and I think for an economy car, the Terraplane aesthetically just was knocked out of the park. This is a 1933, that year officially known as an Essex Terraplane. This car features rare and expensive dual side mounts. The original buyer also opted to go with the 8-cylinder Terraplane rather than the 6, and also purchased the majestic radio with antenna. That's kind of a rare option in 1933. Someone was feeling spendy. The engine is an inline 8 making 94 horsepower. Terraplanes were actually pretty quick back in the day, and the advertising slogan was that the Terraplane 8 was the only car that could beat a Terraplane 6. Incredibly, the owner has the original dealer invoice. The owner points out that this is the same dealership where John Dillinger bought his Terraplane. 1935 Studebaker. This is actually kind of a rare car. In 1935, Studebaker made the Dictator 6 and the Commander 8. Above both of those was the high-end President 8 at roughly twice the price of the lower-end Dictator. This is the Regal Roadster convertible coupe and would have come in at twice the price of any 1935 Ford that you cared to buy. Because the 1930s were really not a good time for luxury cars, Presidents are really rare to see. Here's a happy-looking truck, 1978 International Scout with rally striping. Scout, of course, was the nice-looking competitor to the various Jeeps and Broncos made from 1961 to 1980. It was discontinued when parent company International Harvester was running into all sorts of financial trouble. These vehicles, along with the Broncos, have become very popular collector's items lately. In fact, I just saw that there's a company that is reviving the Scout name. They are all electric. I know that can be a little bit of a divisive topic, so I'm just going to leave that fact there without comment. You can go down and give your opinions in the comments if you'd like. Anyway, much like the Jeeps in the 1970s, these Scouts were available in a wide variety of option packages and special editions. But I gotta say, that color-matched upholstery actually looks really sharp. Overall, really super nice looking truck. Hey, speaking of Jeeps, here is one. This one is, I believe, a 1953 Jeep M170. M170 was the frontline ambulance configuration. It was produced from 1953 to 1963, and during that time they made some tweaks to the internal layout. This was designed to get people from the front lines back to a Mobile Army Surgical Hospital or MASH unit. It actually sits on a wheelbase that is 20 inches longer than a standard Jeep. They're kind of rare. Only 4,000 were built over the entire 10-year run. One of the many neat little features is a drop light with cable reel used for treating patients at night. It also had deep water forging capabilities. Take a look at that snorkel. If you're not familiar with these, that's for getting air to the carburetor even if the carburetor's underwater. We did the Scout, we did the Jeep, now I guess it's time for a Bronco. This one's from 1990. Yes, I know, the 90s. But you know, when I talk to young people that are interested in a hobby and I ask them what their favorite era is, the 90s comes up a lot. I'm planning a whole video where I kind of discuss this phenomenon because I think it's worth discussing. This is the full-size Bronco, which is based on a shortened F-150 chassis. 1990 would be the last year for the smaller Bronco 2 that was based on the Ford Ranger. The 1963 Studebaker Avante with its groundbreaking design by industrial designer extraordinaire Raymond Loewy. Ford has revived the Bronco, and I talked earlier about the revival of the International Scout. Likewise, there have been several attempts over the years to revive the Avante. A company called Avante Motors even produced a throwback design up to as late as 2006. I think at this point, Avante mania has probably died down enough where we're not going to see any more comeback attempts, but you never know. It is a sharp-looking car. 63 would be the last year for the Studebaker Avantes due to the closure of the South Bend plant. All right, let's throw a little muscle into the mix and take a look at what Dr. Oldsmobile has cooked up. This is a 1972 Hurst Olds two-door hardtop. The idea behind the Hurst Olds is to take a standard-ish Oldsmobile and have it performance modified by Hurst. Kind of like the relationship between Mustang and Shelby. This is actually a pretty rare car. There were a little over 600 Hurst Olds made in 72. I'm impressed that he has the original dealer invoice that calls out the Hurst Olds package. That includes the big Olds 455, performance exhaust, performance rear end, among a host of other things. And of course you get the special Hurst Olds badging. This next car is one that, for many people, has come to epitomize the 1950s. This is, of course, the 57 Chevy Bel Air. Although in 1957, Chevy was actually outsold by Ford, the popularity of the 57 Chevy has really grown as time has passed. And really deservedly so. It is a nice, well-proportioned design with a great tail fin treatment. It also has a layout that has proved popular with modifiers. The 57 Chevy has really taken on a life of its own at this point. Moving back to take a look at just a little bit of muscle, here is a 1966 Dodge Charger. 66 was the introductory year for the Charger, and they offered 4 engine options that year, ranging from the 318 up to the new 426. However, less than 500 Chargers were built with the 426 engine. That's out of over 37,000 cars, so the 426 is fairly rare. This happens to be one of them. That's 425 horsepower sitting under the hood. The larger 440 with its 4-barrel carburetor would be introduced the following year, but it would actually be rated at less horsepower than the 426 with its dual 4 barrels. Boy, do I know that grill. For a while I was driving around an 85 Lincoln Town Car, but it was, a beater. This one is so much better on so many levels. First of all, this is a 1979 before Lincoln started to downsize things, and this is not a town car, this is a Mark V. You're looking at the ultimate in 1979 two-door personal luxury. They even have an optional foot switch so that with the tap of a toe, you can advance the tracks on your Molly Hatchet 8-track. Or maybe you were listening to Fleetwood Mac. Hey, nothing to be ashamed of. Rumors is a great album. Not like anyone can judge you. You're driving a Mark V and they're not. Was that last car too many marks for you? Well, let's take one away. This is a 1959 Mark IV. The Lincoln Mark numbering system stopped, backed up, and restarted again, which is why there's 20 years and only 1 mark difference between those two cars. This 59 is a convertible. What makes this convertible even cooler is it still has Lincoln's rear window. That's the reverse slanted breezeway window that is retractable. That came on both hardtops and convertibles. I also got to stop for a second and admire just how clean this trunk is. Look at that. Nice job. The 59s have always been one of my favorite year Lincolns, and I got to admit, this is maybe the nicest one I've ever seen. I even like the white leather interior. Ooh, we got a 58 Fuelie. That's car speak for fuel injected. In this case, a rare factory option on a 58 Pontiac Bonneville. I know, I've covered a 58 Pontiac already. The other one was that Canadian Parisienne, which is rare, and this one is, well, pink. Don't make me decide. This is technically reef shell pink. Between this and Tropicana turquoise and Calypso green, Pontiac had the tropical colors covered in 58. Jeez, look at that dash. Forget your fancy sports cars. This is the car that gets you the date to the tiki bar. Just be nice and drive this car. It's not complicated, guys. All right, we did another Pontiac. We'll do another Jeep. Fair is fair. 1948 CJ2A. Right, so the CJ is the civilianized version of the military Jeep. In fact, that's what CJ stands for, civilian Jeep. The CJ1 and the CJ2 are prototype models, so the CJ2A is the first production Jeep that's available to the general public. The drivetrain is actually a little sturdier because they wanted to make sure that farmers could abuse these things for years. Look at this, it's got a flat belt power takeoff, because you want a four-wheel drive, but you also want to be able to run a drill press sometimes, I guess. Hey, remember in the late 40s, there were still people without electricity. My dad's family didn't get it until the late 40s. They did have it by the time this 1953 Buick Super was built, though. The Super was kind of the mid-range model, above the Special but below the Roadmaster. Buick referred to this as an estate wagon. As much as we love to see woody wagons today, by 1953 the car buying public was getting a little tired of them, and this would be the last year that Buick would offer one. We'll have all modern stamped steel body panels starting in 1954. This is just a beautiful car to look at. We'll step back in time just a little bit for this next one. This is a 1911 Model T Ford, but it's a little something special. For 1911, Ford introduced a new body style that was an attempt to look faster and racier. They called it the Torpedo. Obviously, that long fender line is not what you normally expect to see on a Model T. Also, the hood is longer, the seats sit farther back and lower. The steering column is angled down more. The gas tank has been moved to the back of the car. Unlike other 1911 Fords, the Torpedo has doors. This gives the body design more unbroken horizontal lines. The Torpedo proved less than popular at the time. It was redesigned for 1912 and then dropped, a rare car today. At the risk of giving you automotive whiplash, I'm going to move to this 1978 Matador. This doesn't look like other AMC Matadors because the full-size sedans and wagons had entirely different styling than the Matador Coupe. By 1978, the coupes had transitioned from performance to personal luxury. Take a look at this interior. That looks more comfortable than your couch at home. This would be the last year for the Matador as cash-strapped AMC looked for a partnership with Renault and realigned their model lineup. It's really kind of a shame because I think the Matador Coupe is a really sharp-looking car by 1978 standards. I think because it looks more early 70s than late 70s. Hey, look at that! It's another 33 Terraplane. This one's actually got a really cool Veterans of World War I license plate topper. Those twin horns and the hood doors indicate that this one, like the other one, is a Deluxe 8. It's rare to see one at a show, let alone two, so I'm just gonna keep showing them to you until you like them as much as I do. You will learn to love them. Anyway, the Standard 8 was introduced in 1933 with the Deluxe 8 being a mid-year introduction. That's the standard 8-cylinder head, by the way. The other car was running a very rare aluminum Super Power Dome head. Next up, we have a 1941 Packard 120. Packard had some less expensive models referred to as the Junior Packards, and the 120 was the larger of the two models, the 110 and the 120. This one is a very nice woody station wagon. The Packard Junior models offered upscale Packard styling in a less expensive package, and they literally saved the company. Without the Packard Junior models, Packard would not have been able to weather the Great Depression. This, of course, is just a beautiful car. Just like Packard had its Junior models, Cadillac had the LaSalle, its less expensive companion car. This is a 1940 and would be the final year for the LaSalle. Although LaSalle sales in the early 30s were very good, those numbers had tapered off as the decade wore on. Remember that General Motors is a much larger company than Packard, so buyers that couldn't really afford a Cadillac had the option of moving to a Buick. The LaSalle was kind of stuck in the middle price-wise, and its market share really reflected that. Still, I think the LaSalle front-end treatments might be better than Cadillac. Just saying. Here's a 1924 Studebaker. Studebaker adopted the nickel-plated radiator in 1924, giving it a more modern look. Oh, by the way, if you've ever seen these three cans on old car running boards and wondered what they were, they're for carrying spare water, oil, and gas. They've always kind of nagged at me a little bit, though, because you shouldn't be using water, oil, and gas in equal amounts, but I think that's more of a me problem. This car new cost almost 4 times as much as a base Ford Touring. This is admittedly much more of a car, though. Speaking of competing with Ford, here's a 1937 Chevrolet in business coupe configuration. Actually, I think officially it's just called the coupe, but business coupe is commonly used, so I'm just going to go with that. I've always really loved this body style, and really a lot of people agree with me. This style has proved popular with modifiers. They built two nearly identical versions of this, the regular coupe and the sport coupe. The sport coupe contained a rumble seat, where the regular coupe did not. I don't see the rumble seat step plate on the rear fender, so I'm assuming this is the regular coupe. 1941 Nash Ambassador. This is a really clean design. If you look, the front end tilts out just a little bit. It's subtle, but I think it really makes the whole front end styling. The standard Nash could be had with either a 6 or 8 cylinder engine. This is the 6. And this year they also came out with a smaller unibody car called the Nash 600. They claimed the smaller Nash got 30 miles to the gallon, combined with a 20-gallon fuel tank, gave it a 600-mile range. Nash 600, that's where the name comes from. Hold on, I got to walk around and give you a better look at that steering wheel. Look at this thing. That is beautiful. Nash offered 2 steering wheels in 41, the standard one and a $15 extra deluxe one. The deluxe one was the same but had a horn ring. I'm going to wrap things up with this nice 1951 Mercury station wagon. The Mercury wasn't here as a show car, but was here to try and draw interest for the Ford V8 Museum here in Auburn, Indiana. This is a wonderful museum. I've done a video on it before, but here's another reminder. If you're into Fords of the flathead era at all, or just nice cars, stop and look at that museum. There's their website, fordv8foundation.org.
Well, that was just a small sample of the cars that are here at the AACA Spring Central Meet in Auburn, Indiana. I hope you enjoyed it. We've got a lot more shows coming up. Please subscribe to the channel. There's a little link right out there that you can do that. Or if you want to look at some of my other videos, there's a link right about there that you can do that. Anyway, until next time, talk to you later.